y'all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I know this video is extremely late because my daughter is actually 1 month old today. I'll put her in the clips at the end of this video, but I'm finally here to do my labor and delivery story. Okay, so we're back and little Miss Fussy here is upset. Okay, October 26th, which was a Wednesday, I woke up that morning determined that I was going to have my daughter either that day or the next day or some day really close to it. So I woke up, got myself ready, and I went to the gym here in my apartment complex. Uh-oh, you dropped your passy. Went to the apartment complex, the gym in the apartment complex, and luckily they had a medicine ball and then they have a treadmill. So I went back and forth on the medicine ball and the treadmill, just, you know, really trying to get myself into this position where my water was gonna break, or, you know, contractions. That's the, oh, she spit up. Okay, so we're back for real this time. Okay, so also while we were at the, or while I was at the gym, I also met a neighbor of mine, and she was just like, she was asking me, is the medicine ball gonna help you induce labor? And I said, that's what I've been told. So she said to me, you know what, once you get home, run yourself a bath and just sit in the tub for about 10 to 20 minutes. And by the time you get up, your water will break. So I'm like, okay, thank you. I'll definitely take that into consideration. So I stayed in the gym going back and forth from the medicine ball to the treadmill for about 2.5 hours. So by 11:30 I had walked myself back up to my apartment and made myself some breakfast. So I made raspberry leaf tea. I made I made myself a bagel, and then I also got some fresh pineapple that I had been eating the day before. So I had that as my breakfast, and then around 1 o'clock I wanted to wait to do a little bit more things to help me induce labor, just for the simple fact that my husband doesn't have to rush to leave from work. So around 1 o'clock I went and ran myself the bath and everything, sat in it, and I'm just, as I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, you know, when I get up, this is it. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be in labor finally. I had like pumped myself up, and by the time I stood up so slow. Y'all should have seen it because I was so determined that this was it. I got up, nothing had happened. I was so disappointed. So I got myself a towel, I got up and I sat here and I was just chilling. So probably around 2 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken, I went and got myself some lunch. I made myself some rice and some greens, and then I put some cayenne powdered pepper on it. I ate that, nothing really worked, and I also drank it with another cup of raspberry leaf tea. Still nothing had happened. So by the time my husband had got off of work and got here, it was probably around 6 o'clock. So I'm like, let's go get some castor oil. So let me add this before I continue. I had actually asked my doctor weeks in advance what was safe for me to take once I got later into pregnancy. So they did tell me raspberry leaf tea was fine, castor oil was fine. I was safe to do everything except, you know, extremely dangerous things. But castor oil was safe for me to take. I did ask my doctor for permission, and I was actually skeptical about taking castor oil because I had seen mixed reviews about it. So we went and purchased some castor oil, and we came back and we were in the gym for an hour. Got back up here around 7:15 to about 7:17. I took 2 spoons of the castor oil and drank it with orange juice. So around 9 o'clock, my stomach started to bubble. I'm like looking at my husband, and he's looking at me because he even heard it. I'm like, this could be it. This could be it. So and I ended up just going to the bathroom, sad but sad. So around 10 o'clock, I went to sleep, and I was highly disappointed because nothing else seemed to be happening. So around midnight on October 27th, not even around midnight, at midnight, I woke up right away with sharp pains. I'm like, okay, this is either labor or this is my stomach hurting, diarrhea starting. Went to the bathroom and I came back in the room, tried to relax, and I just was not comfortable. So I got my phone and I got my blanket and I came out here to the living room just to chill on the couch and everything. So I'm like, you know what, maybe it's time that I start timing my contractions, so when I do go to the hospital and they say how far apart your contractions are, I don't look stupid like I did the last time. So 1 o'clock came, 1 a.m. came, and I had contractions 3 to 5 minutes apart since 12. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I think this is really it. 2 o'clock came, still the same thing. within that time frame, I actually picked up my camera to record for y'all, which was actually the beginning of my labor and delivery vlog. So around 2:30, I had called my doctor's office and left the voicemail for the doctor on call, and she called me back within like 2 minutes, and she told me, you know, if your contractions are 3 to 5 minutes apart and you've been having them since 12, it does sound like labor. I suggest that you come in and let us check you. So I'm like, okay. I told myself I would try to wait it out a little bit. So around 2:50, I went in the room and I woke up my husband and told him, hey, I think I might be in labor, but let me go take a shower first to see if it's Braxton Hicks, or at least to calm myself down. And even if it's not, and even if it is labor, let me wash myself up before we go into the hospital. So took the shower and I still was having these contractions. The shower did not help at all. Got in the car, got to the hospital around 3:35, and I had to walk from the parking garage to the front of labor and delivery, and I was okay at first, but then halfway through I was just like, oh Kendall, I can't do this. I can't do this at all. So he actually had to go get me a wheelchair, and that even made me indicated to me that I definitely think this is labor, because I've never not been able to walk to where I needed to go. So we got upstairs and we were waiting in the little labor and delivery area, waiting for somebody to come get us or take us back. And I'm still sitting there having contractions. Kendall's timing it. So the nurse comes out. So the nurse came out and she looked really, really young. She didn't even look my age, and I'm 24. And she had pink and purple hair. And she, you know, she looked really nice at first. So she came out and she was just like, Miss Coleman, and I'm like, yes. So she wheeled us back, and wheeled me back. And as we were walking back there, she was just like, oh, you were here the other day. Mind you, throughout my whole pregnancy, I had been to labor and delivery 5 times. The first 2 times were right around 20 weeks and 24 weeks, so it was really early. And the last 3 times were, one time where I thought I had preeclampsia and I was told to come in, and then the other time was, you know, the Monday before. So, but every time that I had been there, I had never been asked, oh, or I never said, or anybody ever said to me, oh, you were just here. So something in me told me something don't sound right. So she hooked me up to the monitor, hooked me up to the cuff, the finger cuff, everything. She did it within less than 5 minutes, and I'm not even exaggerating or anything. Asked me all the questions that she had to ask me, and it just seemed like she was rushing the process. So she looked at the screen while she was still asking me questions like, have you fallen in the last 6 months and all of that, and she was just like, oh, your contractions don't seem consistent, and the baby sounds great, and you don't have high blood pressure, none of that good stuff. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, my contractions don't seem consistent, and I'm looking at Kendall like, I know I'm not tripping. I know I have been having contractions for almost 4 hours now. She was just like, no. And me being inexperienced, being a first time mom, I don't know how to read the contraction monitor, but now I know. So after she did what she did, she went to go and check me. And I promise y'all, getting your cervix checked isn't the most comfortable thing at all. And it really does depend on who's doing it for you to either it hurts or it doesn't hurt as much. So she barely touched me. Like, I mean, she barely touched anything. She literally, I can't lift this finger up, but it seemed like she just touched like that and was like, oh, you're a ½ centimeter. So I'm like, I'm frustrated at this point, because in the past I have gone from 2 to 1 to 2 to 1, and I believe one of my subscribers even told me it really does depend on the person that checks you. But for me to go from 2 centimeters to ½ centimeter, that just seems a little bit off. So I was really blown. So she went to get the doctor, and the doctor came in, and this was actually the doctor that had checked me on Monday that told me my water didn't break. So he looked at the monitor and was like, okay, you're having contractions, but they seem to be a little bit off. They seem to be 7 to 9 minutes apart. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I haven't even been back here 10 minutes already. So of course, but something doesn't seem right. And he was like, and nurse so-and-so told me you're only a ½ centimeter. So he was like, you need to come back when your contractions are 3 to 5 minutes apart or your water breaks. So I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit confused, because I've been testing it out and you told me 2 days ago to come back when what's going on now? So my husband, are you falling asleep, baby? My husband even hopped in, was just like, sir, she's been having contractions. I don't know what else y'all want her to do. She's in a lot of pain. There's no way that this isn't labor. So the doctor was just like, oh, well, you know what? I'm sorry, the nurse interrupted and was just like, well, when you're in labor, you'll know you're in labor. This is not labor. I know you want your baby here now, yada, yada, yada. Basically saying all the typical things doctors and nurses say when somebody's late in pregnancy, but with so much attitude. And I'm just like, you know what? Okay. So I start tearing up a little bit. I get dressed and we're walking back to the car. I'm still struggling and the contractions seem to be a little bit worse than what they were when we first got here. So I'm crying to my husband, telling him, I don't know what else to do. There's no way that I can be in this much pain until either my water breaks, Lord knows whenever that will be, or until the doctor decides to induce me. I can't do this. So I was crying, crying, crying. And as we were on the way home, I live about 20 minutes away from the hospital. As we were on the way back home, my contractions got stronger. It got to the point that I couldn't talk through my contractions. And I was telling my husband, I said, this is no way that this isn't labor. So he was like, should we go back? I said, there's no point. Let's try to wait it out a little bit. So we got home and I told him, you go in the room and you go to sleep since you have to be to work in 2.5 hours. So I try to stay out here. I'm out here like, whoo, whoo. I can't really breathe. And he comes back out and he's just like, no, I can't go to sleep during this. I need to stay out here and monitor you. So we came out here, we tested it out for our time. We continued to time our contractions. Then I went to go take a shower to try to calm it down and everything. And while I was in the shower, I felt very lightheaded. So I was like, let me get out of the shower before I fall. Came out, was chilling on the couch. And then I got really uncomfortable where I couldn't lay on the couch. I couldn't lay on the floor, nothing. And my vision seemed like it was very off. If anybody has fainted before or anything like that, you get this glaze over your eyes where you can't see straight. And I just felt very uncomfortable. I can't even describe it. For those of you that have been in labor, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm like pacing back and forth, trying to breathe. I'm in so much pain. And then I start to violently throw up. And sadly, it was in my kitchen sink as well. So Kendall's just like, oh my gosh, should I call 911? I'm like, no, we still have some time. So that's when I decided to go to the bathroom again. And once again, feeling really lightheaded, can't really see too straight. So I got up, or I wiped, got up, and I looked in the toilet and I saw what seemed to be a lot of mucus. I had been losing a lot of my mucus plug before, but this seemed like a huge clump of it. And then it looked like what was like a little dots of blood on top of it. But I for some reason, I just didn't take that too seriously either. At that point, I really should have got up and went to labor and delivery again. But I guess because I was just rejected like the way I was, I just didn't want to go back just to be sent back. So I came out, and that was pretty much the last thing I remember. And when I woke up, when I came back from my fainting spell, there was a lot of guys on top of me or around me. And I realized that it was EMS. So they started asking me questions and everything like that. So from what my husband told me, I had passed out and I was out cold for about 2 minutes. And he had called 911 and they had rushed here. Luckily, we don't live too far from the fire station because the firemen were actually the first people to be here, and then EMS got here. So long story short, they asked me a whole bunch of questions, got in the ambulance, and the guy was very nice. He said his wife had actually just had their child not too long ago, so I went through this, and he was just like, the best thing I'm gonna tell you is you have to try to breathe through them. And that's probably why you passed out, because you weren't breathing. And he was like, I'm going to time him on the way to the hospital. So from here to the hospital, like I said, was 20 minutes, or is 20 minutes. And when we got there, he said, your contractions are 1 to 2 minutes apart. He was like, there's no way that you're not in labor, and I don't understand why they sent you home. Forgot to mention this too. Me being at labor and delivery earlier, from check-in to check-out, we were there for 30 minutes. Mind you, I have never been to a hospital where I was in and out, whether I was completely fine or violently sick, for 30 minutes, okay? So we got back to the hospital, and that nurse, I guess she was off at that time because I did not see her. There were a whole bunch of people, and the registration lady from earlier that had registered us had looked at me and Kendall like, weren't y'all just here? What in the world? So a different doctor came in and he went to go check my cervix, and Kendall looked at me like, I don't want this man checking me. And I was like, he has to do it. So he was just like, okay, go ahead. The doctor checked me and he was like, you are 5 centimeters dilated. So we were just there an hour ago, and it took 40 minutes if you consider both drives back and forth. I had progressed from 0.5 centimeters to 5 centimeters in an hour. So that made me think obviously I knew I wasn't 0.5 centimeters, but if she had properly checked me, you know, I would have known how many centimeters I actually was at that time, to see how quickly I progressed from whatever centimeters to 5 centimeters. And my thing is, I really felt like the doctor should have kept me at least for an hour to see if my contractions would progress or if I would dilate more before sending me home. But whatever. Anyway, he had checked me. I was 5 centimeters. So he has sent me back to have Mason. Yeah. So basically I had labored from 12 a.m. to 9 a.m. Without any medicine, and the anesthesiologist came in to give me my epidural, and she numbed me, but she didn't properly numb me, so I kind of felt I felt the epidural at first. So she actually had to numb me 3 times before I felt only pressure. So I got the epidural, and after that I just felt wonderful. You know, I was already bearing through it, but those contractions were very, very strong. I actually had a really good nurse, and pretty much I was able to dilate to 7 centimeters on my own, and I was at 7 centimeters for a while, and that's when my doctor decided that he was going to start me on Pitocin so we could you're sleeping, so we could speed up the process. So we had started Pitocin and everything. They had put the monitor on her head and everything seemed great. So finally I had reached the 10 centimeters, and the nurse was in there and she was trying to check me. She was like, oh my gosh, I see a lot of hair. And I was really excited. And around 6:15 I started to push. And right around, or at 6:44, Miss Mason was born. So honestly, from 9 to 6 p.m. my labor was great. I felt great. The nurses were great. The doctors were great. You know, she was born, like I said, at 6:44 p.m. and she was 7 pounds 10 ounces, and she has been an incredible blessing ever since then. So for those of you that are first-time mothers or even 8th-time mothers, and I know for those of you that have been in this process before, you've probably been pushed away from labor and delivery, and they told you you're not in labor, and they told you pretty much everything that nurse had told me. I will tell you to stand your ground. Don't ever feel like you shouldn't go to labor and delivery like me. Trust me, second time around, I'm gonna go every time I think I need to go. If you think you're in labor or you think something's wrong, it's always best to go to find out you're fine, versus staying home and doing what I did and having to call the EMS and everything like that. You know, it just really bothers me that that nurse was so quick to shun us off, because if I had lived further away or whatever the case may be, she kind of put me and my baby's life in jeopardy. But everything's great. I'm so glad to finally get this video out. If you have not seen my labor and delivery vlog, please make sure you go check that out. And thank you so much for watching. Oh, I almost forgot. Let me show y'all Mason. You sleeping, mama? So this is Mason. She's so knocked out. But anyways, thank you so much for watching.